Member for Vancouver West End.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I want to take just a quick moment to also wish a very happy birthday to the Deputy Chair of the Committee of the Whole, the member for Courtney Comox. Happy birthday. Well, I rise, Honourable Speaker, today to talk about pride. It's something I've spoken about in this House before, not just pride in general, but pride in terms of lesbian, gay, bi, trans, questioning, two-spirit folks in this province. I've heard many folks in this chamber already celebrate Pride Month, wish each other happy Pride, and what's been kind of cool, Honourable Speaker, is the folks doing it have not, at least to my knowledge, been out as I am. Some would say they were straight and are here as allies, and I just want to honour that and thank them for speaking so strongly about the need to value diversity, the need to stand up for human rights. Honourable Speaker, this is a topic that's not new to me in this chamber. I think partly because of my community, partly because of who I am and where I've come from and how I've grown up. It's the Vancouver's West End and Cole Harbour communities, the West End in particular, has been the home of pride and the home of the fight for human rights for LGBTQ2S+ folks for a long time. Now, before I move on, Honourable Speaker, I've used some acronyms. Lesbian, gay, bi, trans, questioning, two-spirit, plus. I remember not too long ago, I was sitting on a stage with some politicians there to celebrate pride in their community. And one of the politicians up there, strong ally, they said, leaned over to me and said, "What does that LGBTLT stand for?" I said, "Well, it's not lesbian, gay, bacon, lettuce, and tomato. It's lesbian, gay, bi, trans, two-spirit, plus. Some folks add more acronyms, some have others to acknowledge asexual folks, intersex folks. Really, the aim here, Q for queer, some folks say it's in, some folks say it's out because they find it insulting. The idea is inclusion, that folks that don't fit into the traditional binary, straight, two-picket fence world, well, maybe they have two picket fences, I don't, but I certainly know some folks who do, who fit into that world now, because they need inclusion and they want to be part of this society. And in order to be included, you have to be visible. You have to be seen. So why pride? Why that word, Honourable Speaker? Well, I think to my own origins and how folks that I was attracted to, I was taught that that was a shameful thing. I shouldn't be attracted to men. I shouldn't have those feelings. And so I didn't. I pretended I didn't. I thought through how to talk about all the hot models that I saw in the local magazines, and they are hot. I guess I would say, I'll out myself here, Honourable Speaker, I'm bisexual. Whoa. I think most folks would say that I was a gay politician, and I've not corrected them, Honourable Speaker, because I'm in a loving gay relationship with an incredible husband, Romy, with an incredible son. But in high school, of course, it was hard to understand that you could have feelings for multiple peoples, that you could love folks from both genders or folks who are of no genders or in a third place or in a different place, because we were taught there was one way to be. Slowly over time, I saw that that was not the case, that yes, you could love outside, and that you could love in a bigger sense than I'd been taught was allowed. And I think that was in high school, the end of high school. I remember telling a counselor of who I was and who I had attractions to, and she had a great idea, Honourable Speaker. She said, "Well, I'm going to call a school assembly, and you can get up there on the stage, Spencer, and you can tell everyone." I don't know about you, Honourable Speaker, but that sounded about the most horrifying thing ever. And I said, I actually want to finish high school. I don't want to be chased out of the school. I don't want people beating me up. I don't want to be so depressed because the hatred that I'd feel. I actually want to finish high school. So no, thank you, Counselor. I'm not doing that. Even though it probably would have helped some kids. And I think that's where this visibility thing comes from, is this idea that you need to be visible so folks can see themselves and see that there is no shame to be who you are. I was lucky, Honourable Speaker. I met my husband not too long after graduating high school. We met about a year, not even a year later. And it was the best thing that could have happened for somebody in my place because he already knew who he was. He started the first Gay Straight Alliance in BC out in Maple Ridge as a young man, and that led to people chasing him home. That led to him having to leave school, transfer schools, because of the amount of hatred that was directed his way. But it wasn't just young people trying to find a better life, Honorable Speaker. I think I speak about these origin stories because there are so many people who stood up against that violence and that hatred to find that better path. Teachers at the time, believe it or not, some politicians at the time in the 90s started pushing. But Honorable Speaker, first I'll go back. Before I was alive, before we all were sitting in this place, governments had criminalized homosexuality in a big way. 1869, long before this place, even these buildings existed, of course, you could be locked up for life. They thought it was a good change because before that you could be condemned to death. So they changed it to you could be locked up for life. Of course, it took many, many more years until 1969 when the practices were decriminalized by the federal government. And then from that, we jump forward. Of course, there were protests during that period. One of my constituents, the late Ted North, told me about how he would stand on the stairs of the courthouse in Vancouver, dressed in full drag to protest so that we could have better equality. At the time, you could be arrested for wearing the clothing of another gender, and so as long as you had 3 items of the appropriate gendered clothing, you'd be okay. So he had, as he put it, 1 pair of men's jockey shorts and 2 men's rolled up crew socks as his breasts, and that was enough that he wouldn't get arrested. He'd get harassed, that's for sure, and he sure had stories about that. You jump forward to the 70s, Gay Liberation Front, GATE onwards into the 80s, and we'll cover that off in the next section, Honorable Speaker. I just want to say it's a long story, but it's an important one. We've got to remember that it took power and action to get to where we are today.
Recognizing the member from Peace River South.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I want to thank the honourable member for bringing this forward today and for their remarks. As was mentioned, month of June is and marks Pride Month around the world, and here in British Columbia, you know, we join all the other communities to celebrate Pride Month. I think it's important, though, and I think I'll continue on with the members' train of thought around the history, because we have to remember this didn't start because of celebration. Pride Month really started as really a protest. As the member mentioned, if you think back in my time, shortly after I was born, 1969, just over 50 years ago, in Stonewall Rebellion took place in New York. It was quite common at that time for the police to raid popular gay bars that were in New York. But in 1969, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, 2 transgender women of color, decided enough's enough, and they fought back. And there, in a lot of ways, started the protest and the fight for equality that needed to take place. It really did a lot in the United States, but that quickly spread into Canada and around the world, fighting for equality. So really at that time, in a lot of ways, Pride was born in that month of June. It took until 1999 for the Supreme Court of Canada, though, to rule it unconstitutional to deny same-sex couples equality. And then on top of that, it took almost another decade to July of 2005 for the Federal Civil Marriage Act to come into place, as the member well know, making same-sex marriage legal across Canada. I think it's important, though, that we need to address in this House that legal equality is not the same thing as social equity or acceptance. And unfortunately, members of the LGBTQ 2S+ community still face homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. I think we all, and I know we all, need to fight against this discrimination and intolerance in our communities. It's my belief, and I know it's the belief shared by everyone in this House, that regardless of someone's gender identity, sexual orientation, they should have equal rights and treated equal in our society. And we can do a lot still in this House and in our society to ensure that that happens. Sorry. Look, everyone deserves to love. Everyone deserves to be loved. Thankfully, there's supports out there for people who are feeling marginalized and discriminated against. I'm here today also to say there's supports out there for those that don't understand. As a father of a non-binary child, I'll tell you, I had questions. What came out of that was healthy discussion. And you need that healthy discussion to have understanding. Out of that comes acceptance and love. I could not imagine anyone going through life not being loved or not being able to love someone else. With that, I congratulate and acknowledge and celebrate the member from Vancouver West End for their love that he shares with their husband, for being so open and for being an advocate for equality. I think what we've learned over the last couple of weeks too is we have to learn from history. Horrible things happen in the past, but we need to learn from that. We can't deny the past. We can learn from it, and we can do better as a society. Acceptance and inclusion is something we should all be striving for. We need to do a better job at. But I do acknowledge, and I believe, as the member might say as well, that we have come a long way. But we have a lot further to go. So with that, my apologies for getting emotional, but I do want to, on behalf of everyone in this House as well, to congratulate and celebrate everyone who's partaking, which I hope is everyone, for Pride Month. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Vancouver West End.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Peace River South, and for his leadership within his caucus as well around these issues and in his community. And there's no need to apologize for being emotional, because it is emotional. It goes to the heart of who we are as human beings and who he is as a father and as a community representative as well. It's a beautiful thing to be able to have that emotion and to be open to those feelings, because for so long, so many of us have closed off those feelings, have ratcheted down to try and be able to be safe. And to be able to be open enough that you can share those feelings means that there is a level of safety and acceptance together, and that's how we grow. Pride Month, June. There is some controversy. Should we call it Pride Month, June in BC, in Canada? Of course, in BC, a lot of our big Pride events have happened in August. In my community, that's when Pride is. That's when some of the first Gay Unity Weeks happened, 1979, 1973, 1980. Some of the big first marches happen in August. But of course, Stonewall and the leadership shown by trans women of color, I don't think can ever be forgotten, because they put their necks on the line when other people weren't willing to. They stood out as marginalized individuals in their community with great bravery, because they knew the cost it would have on them, more so than on somebody that looks like myself. When we make these statements, I think one thing that's important to remember is many times that does lead to an increased level of targeting. So when folks speak out against racism they've faced, or sexism, or homophobia, or transphobia, often they themselves then become the target of those attacks again. So I thank my staff back at my office. You'll probably be hearing from some of the usual suspects that we've had to deal with. Apologies, but even though most of us are moving together in a better way, there are still those, including constituents of mine, who very much want us to go back into a darkened path of violence and hatred. Honourable Speaker, we've come a long way, I agree. I think of how far in my lifetime. 1992, the government of BC added sexual orientation to BC's Human Rights Code. It took 4 more years before the federal government did that. 1995, same-sex adoption was added to our laws in BC. 1996, our first out MLA, Tim Stevenson, was elected. I think Ted Nebling not too long after that. 1998, pension rights extended to same-sex couples. 2003, of course, same-sex marriage. The Court of Appeal ruled it was okay. 2008, Jen McGinn, our first lesbian elected to this legislature. 2008, the push for sexual orientation, gender identity, and education in schools began. Took another 10 years or so, 8 years or so before we fully got it implemented, but it was the start. 2010, I started pushing for gender identity and expression to be added to the Human Rights Code. Got it put in 2016. The Human Rights Commission, top surgery, changing gender markers, on and on the list goes, and there does need to be more change. The culture needs to change, not just the law, and I thank everyone for doing their part to lead to that cultural change so we have the true love and equality everyone deserves. Thank you, Honourable Chair.